Hello and welcome to the Evidence Based Chiropractor. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Langmaid. On today's episode, I have an interview with a friend and business partner, Dr. Allan Miner, CEO of Chiro Matchmakers, and it's all around virtual chiropractic assistants. That might be a new term to you. It was to me, but now using a virtual assistant is an integral part of what I do in all of my businesses, including my practice, the Evidence Based Chiropractor, the Smart Chiropractor, Movement Health, AOMC Diagnostics, Read My MRI, all of them. I use a virtual assistant, and I believe that you can and should too. And Dr. Allan and I dive into what are the things these people are doing? Who are they? And how can this really work for your practice? Because a virtual chiropractic assistant can be less than $10 an hour, college educated, and absolute professional. So without further ado, here's my interview with my friend, Dr. Allan Miner. If you are a lone wolf, if you have a practice that's scaling, maybe you have a business enterprise, today's episode is one you're going to want to pay attention to. We're going to talk all about virtual CAs. What does that mean? How are we using them? How can you use them? And why this is so critically important pretty much to every single step of your journey as a business professional, entrepreneur, and chiropractor. Allan, thanks for coming on and chatting today.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. So we have a lot of docs that I'm sure have heard the term and many who have never heard the term virtual CA. Let's just start by defining what that is.
Yeah. And like, I think of wellness 15 years ago, I almost feel like virtual CA is the same way. Everybody's trying to figure out what that means. In our case, we're talking about real life, offshore, remote people to help your practice. I see other people using the term virtual CA as an AI solution. But to be clear, at Chiro Matchmakers, we're in the business of staffing up offices. And so these are real people. They have college degrees. They're outside of the United States. And so that's the big secret is, the cost for us to hire them is less than it costs to hire somebody in your practice in the US. But because of exchange rates, because of cost of living, these folks are making a better living working for chiropractic practices than they do in their, chosen, studied field inside of their own country. So we have engineers, nurses, architects, trainers, teachers, all kinds of people that work as virtual chiropractic assistants. And they make a better living doing that for us than they would being a nurse or an engineer in their own country, which blows a lot of people's minds. But that's really kind of a fun win-win. I want to immediately, sometimes people almost get this notion of like slave labor. It's like, no, not at all. We're actually giving people a better lifestyle and benefiting our practice by, helping to lower some overhead costs on labor and on hiring people.
That makes total sense to me. And I want to get into the specific task that I've used a virtual chiropractic assistant for, and as well as what you've seen. But before we get there, there's a couple things that you brought up that I'm sure perked up some ears. And that is like, is management of these individuals challenging? Are they offshore? So is there accents? This will kind of tailor into the different tasks and benefits that they can provide and are currently providing in, hundreds of chiropractic practices around the world. But what offshore, like, what does that mean? How do you think about management? Some of those challenges docs are initially going to think of. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I was sure hesitant about that at first. Boy, if I can't see them, how's this going to work? What if they disappear on me? And let's just call a spade a spade. That is a possibility. But these are professionals, and these are people with long work histories, making a living. They want to make a paycheck. So not showing up is a good way to, ruin that for them on their end. So, and also, we check backgrounds and references and work histories. It's maybe a benefit of partnering with an agency like ours as we do all the lifting and the working for people to make sure we're finding good people with a solid background. Zoom, I think folks are really surprised just how much you can do to train and bring somebody up to speed, just like we're doing this interview on Zoom and a screen share. And it's amazing how quickly you get somebody who's really smart and sharp. And that's maybe something I wanted to find, Jeff, right out of the gate is, I still run 11 different practices in Florida, Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas. So, I value our folks that are in the offices, greeting our people, taking care of them. So let me be clear on that. But then there's this whole back end suite of work that, quite frankly, I have found folks who make it through a 4-year college degree oftentimes are better suited for than the people that maybe don't have the college degrees that I'm able to hire for 20, 22, 23, $24 an hour. So I'm getting what we call these A-level players. So they're quick, they're fast, so they can learn your EHR system and all. We can talk about all the different things they do. But just through Zoom, you really are able to coach up a professional quite quickly. These people are out of several countries. Honduras, Mexico, and the Philippines are primarily where we are out of. But the majority these days are the Philippines. We've simply found there's a more willing, higher educated workforce. There are varying degrees of accents, but in general, a Filipino accent doesn't seem to be so grating to your typical, United States citizen's ear if you're using them for phone work. That's just one of the things we do. A lot of these people never talk to your customers. But English is oftentimes something they learn very early in grade school. And of course, depending on the job, a lot of people hire these virtual assistants to answer their phones or do outbound phone work. We screen that quite heavily. And, there's luckily massive US corporations, American Express, Dell, Tesla, a lot of these big companies, they have massive workforces out of these countries. So a lot of these people have actually cut their teeth serving inside of these companies. So a lot of times they actually find it appealing to work for a smaller business owner here in the United States instead of a big company, but they've been trained on, basic phone etiquette and accents and a lot of the things people have concerns with when they're considering onboarding somebody offshore.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So you mentioned some of the cost of what somebody with the level of skill and expertise that many people overseas have, what that would cost, $20 plus minimum in terms of what you see here in the States. When we talk about cost of virtual CAs, what's roundabout numbers on that? What's a doc looking at? What do they have to bracket and think about in their mind?
Yeah, we charge a flat rate. It's $9.87 an hour. The way we do that for our customers is our specialty, Jeff, is really in sourcing people. For an average hire for a chiropractor, we find and interview on average about 200 different people. And, it's, we have to do an onboarding call with the owner so that our team can really extract what's the skill set of the ideal person. There's not a unicorn or a jack of all trades. So if a clinic owner, they might want somebody doing more of the design, editing work to handle their social media. It's really easy for us to find those people because we know where to look. Somebody else might need help with phones. So maybe their voice and past history and work experience is going to be more important. Somebody else might be looking for, a lot of people hire us for data, for their bookkeeping, for creating their KPIs, their daily metrics, EOB, insurance, mapping people out, doing work inside the EHR. They might want somebody that's more of that kind of data analytics, bookkeeping, accounting kind of a background. So, and sometimes people want somebody that does all those things, like a traditional in-office CA, and we can find that, but you're going to give trade-offs. The person who's maybe great live with your person might not be so good at the details, versus the person who's really good at the details and the back office stuff might not be the most personal stuff. You're going to make the same trade-offs with somebody offshore. And what's really been remarkable to me, Jeff, is simply when you're paying in the US 20, we place in-office CAs for docs, and the average is around $23. And there's some, like I said, lovely people. We've got a great team of them, but oftentimes these folks don't have degrees. In the US, usually when you talk degree, you're talking $50,000 to maybe $80,000 starting on average. So for this $9.87, you're getting yourself into this executive assistant level atmosphere. And again, the $9.87, then after we find and vet a person, as I was explaining, then, we send video clips of the top people we find, and our owners pick two, and then we facilitate the interview with them. And once they hire them, then we run the payroll twice a month. We have to hire people a minimum of 20 hours, Jeff, because this is their livelihood. So we found less than that. They're trying to piece too many different jobs together. So typically it's a minimum of 20 hours a week at $9.87. And we handle all of the international payroll, the exchange rates. We do all of that. And we make a small margin on that payroll is how we stay in business. But what it does for the practice owner, it gives them an expense, a line item expense, like you're paying your EHR system or your phone service, that now you're not having to deal with, PTO and vacation time and hours. Of course, virtual assistants do take vacation time off, but it's simply unpaid. Now, some owners, when they get that person over time, what's happened to me is we have, these folks that are absolutely integral parts of our business. Then we want to give them perks. But we can accommodate that with our owners. When you find somebody really good, like somebody working in your office, you want to take good care of them.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Patient Pilot. Your most valuable asset, your patient list. Patient Pilot turns it into action. Automatically send weekly personalized emails to reactivate patients who already know, like, and trust you. When they click to schedule, ask a question, or refer a friend, you're instantly notified, making follow-ups easy. Patient Pilot helps you help more people and grow your practice. Schedule your demo today at thesmartchiropractor.com to see the difference. Now, back to the episode.
Did I answer your question? Did I go around it?
No, totally. Yeah, you totally did. And I can speak into this for a moment as well, because, within Chiro Matchmakers, I've used virtual CAs, and I've used them for a pretty diverse range of work, maybe beyond what many of the listeners will, but I'll throw it out there really just to pique the interest. We've done web design work. We've done research work based upon being able to understand a market and then marketing as we move forward with that, amongst a host of other items as well. So I guess when I'll ask you, Allan, you touched on a couple of these things, but a doc listening, what is typically maybe a couple of the first projects as you're speaking with docs that it's like, oh, I'm interested. I want to dip my toe in. I'm not ready to turn over all my office operations, but like, what are maybe 1, 2, or 3 of those items that you see docs getting started with? And then what's kind of the bracket? You touched on the process, but what are some of the things where you're like, okay, now this is what I wouldn't recommend. And so maybe both sides of that coin.
Yeah, great question. What's interesting, a newer one for us, but people always grab onto our podcasts. And so something we've done so much of this, Jeff, that we have SOPs. We can help owners if they want to have a virtual assistant handle phones. We can walk you through how to do that, what phone systems are best. If you've got a server and not a cloud-based EHR, we can walk you through how to certify them on HIPAA and, how to get into your server in a way that doesn't disrupt the rest of the office. Podcasts are a new one. I think every chiropractor should have a podcast, and you really helped architect this out for our team so that, we can walk somebody through how to do a podcast. So a lot of times it's podcasts, social media. I think podcasts and your social media channel aren't maybe necessarily direct marketing plays for your practice owners, but boy, are they important parts of building a good practice. And, your existing people listening to your podcast, watching your Instagram presence, their ongoing value that you're building, the email lists that you provide for us for my clinics, driving people from those emails to the podcast and the Instagram pages helps keep people plugged in, helps educate them about the services we offer in the clinics. So those are things that we tried for years to offload off to staff, and people just didn't love doing it. You kind of got to be wired a certain way. So, now I can, and again, you trained this, Jeff, when we'd be together. If anybody goes back and looks at our Matchmakers Instagram page a while back, or my Instagram page, Allan Miner, a lot of that is you asking me questions off camera. I'm answering them, and then, we send them off just that raw footage, and they're the ones who cut it and edit it into reels. And so it's making that easy for the owner is how we've been able to produce a lot of content. So those are interesting tech ones that I think just add to the culture and the long-term value of clinics that everybody knows they should be doing, but a lot of people aren't doing. The monotonous stuff, the billing, we don't typically find billers, but we find people that have done billing, so they understand EHR, they understand coding, they can help upload EOBs, do follow-up calls with insurance companies. All that support work for the billing is really popular. Also, personal injury. We just found, having a really solid virtual CA who can send off, of course, all the notes and everything to the attorneys. But then the follow-up, we've really, personal injuries slowly, like a lot of practice owners, become a big part of our practice revenue. Not intentionally for us, but so we had these balances. It just kind of, they'd sit there for 1, 2, 3 years. And then one day when they're ready, they'd call us and we'd hopefully get a check. Now we have a VA who literally calls on our cases every 1 to 2 weeks. And we just found, being that annoying squeaky wheel, just checking in, attorney, how's the case? Any progress? Okay, thanks. It was amazing looking at our receivables year after year, how much we, just sped up getting paid because we were bugging people all the time. That's been a big one. Phones, of course, answering hours, if you're doing any kind of SEO spend, Google spend, to then miss those calls when they finally come in just hurts when you own a practice. And so, a lot of times people start on lunch hours, on weekend hours, on evening hours, on morning hours with phones. And then that often expands. We don't have the phone ring in any of my practices because we want people to be present with the people in the clinic. And when that phone rings, we know we've paid $300 or $400 to get that phone to ring. We don't want that thing to ring more than twice. Early on, I paid for Google ads and I had a snippet put on the site. And at the end of the month, out of 50 calls from Google, we picked the phone up one time. And I just thought, well, that was dumb. We better answer the phone more often. And then I think the next day I was calling like an HVAC guy and they didn't answer. So I called the next one on Google and they didn't answer. And I called the next one until somebody answered. And that's who I hired. And I realized, that same thing's probably happening to me with our clinics that we're paying to promote. So that's a big deal, answering phones. Also, not to mention, is keeping your clients happy. They want to get a hold of somebody live. And then the other one now, with a lot of the marketing that people are doing inside Go High Level, I think you taught me, Jeff, every minute that goes by from when they opt in, you're losing the warmth of that lead. So our team gets notified instantly and they're all over that lead. And so we jumped up our schedule rate on marketing by 20, 30%. So there's a lot of different ways to use these people, and then maybe the entry point to answer your question is a lot of people just hire us for projects. They've never, probably one of the biggest concerns people have coming in is, do I have enough work for this person? And so, we structure, if they're doing social media, if they're doing insurance, you can kind of segment the hours that they're doing. If they're doing phones, you'll have them available. The certain hours you want the phone answered. And of course, if they're not busy on the phone, it's nice to have them working on something else. But if you're still just trying to get your head around this, we do a lot of project work for people. And one example is we're both members of UAC. And there's a big lift right now. UAC is doing the top 20 most influential chiropractors. And so there's a list that AI generated of nominees, and then all the UAC membership added people in. And we didn't know a lot of those people. How do we contact them? They're nominated. Well, we hired CMM to simply do outreach to get cell phones and email. So we just start, Googling and calling people. Hey, you've been nominated. We'd like to send you the information packet. When people are changing EHRs, when they're uploading data from one system to another, and you just get this monotonous repetition, a lot of times people will come hire us as one-off project work for a 10, 20, 30, 40-hour job. And sometimes that gets them used to using a VA and seeing how it works before they, hire somebody kind of to put on the payroll, if you will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to encourage everybody listening and watching. We've dropped a link down below so you can connect with Allan and the team at Chiro Matchmakers. Complimentary call and just ask questions, discover how you can utilize a virtual CA in your practice. One thing I can speak into is I think everybody listening has tasks that they either aren't getting done, they know they should, things that are getting done late, things that you avoided, the whole host of items that go in to running a chiropractic practice. And being able to utilize a virtual CA is, one, way easier than you think. So schedule a call, have a conversation, walk through the process. And two, it's super affordable. And to get affordable help that is ultra professional is just so nice. And that's been something over the last year and a half, 2 years for myself. I've really discovered, wow, this is way easier than I thought. And the quality of the work is so high that it's great. And guess what? It's one of those things where as you start to utilize the services of somebody who might be, as I would say, beyond the four walls of your practice, you start to then uncover and discover other areas of opportunity as well. And that's all leverage for you as a business owner. So, Allan, I really want to say thank you so much for coming on and chatting today. Again, everybody listening and watching, connect down below with Allan and the team. Allan, any closing thoughts as we wrap here?
Simply, Jeff, as you're talking there, I was reflecting, thinking, this really has brought stability to our businesses to get really high quality people. But even more importantly, I was looking at our offices and we don't have the CA turnover we used to have in office CAs, the live people. And I think what used to happen is, we'd hire a CA and they'd have to do everything. And now they're much more specialized. We hire people who are people in the office. So all they're doing is greeting people and checking people in and checking people out and all that, insurance work, KPI, data, accounting, all the stuff we talked about, editing of reels, social media. They don't have to do that. So now when somebody leaves either side, from a virtual assistant leaves or an office CA leaves, we're not so vulnerable. There was a time there when a CA left, we were screwed. Like, they did everything, or I didn't even know everything they did. And now, that our work is much better divided. So if somebody leaves, it's a little uncomfortable, but it's not difficult to find somebody to replace them because they're not such a jack of all trades that know every corner of the business. And I think that has really brought stability, and the fancy word we use is it's operationalized our practices. So they're a lot more stable. And quite frankly, what that all comes back to is I sleep a lot better at night. I'm not so exposed when somebody leaves our team.
I love to hear it. If you are listening and have not experienced utilizing a virtual CA in your practice, click down in the show notes, connect with Allan and the team at Chiro Matchmakers, have a conversation. Now is the time to do so. It's time to get set up over the summer so that you can ensure Q4 is your best quarter yet. Allan, thanks so much for coming on and chatting today.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Evidence Based Chiropractor. If you want to grow your practice, come back for next week's episode. If you want to grow faster, visit the evidencebasedchiropractor.com and join our MD Marketing membership today.